Welcome back, dear listener. There is no rush tonight. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be. Just my voice, and the quiet room around you, and the long, slow hours stretching out ahead of us. If you can, dim the lights a little more now. If your eyes want to close already, let them. Tonight I'm going to take you somewhere very far away, back to the Ice Age, and tell you a long, unhurried story about warmth. Not a frightening story. A story about how, even in the coldest, darkest nights, across many winters and many small lives, people found ways to stay warm, to stay close, to stay alive. Take a slow breath in now, in 2, 3, and out, 2, 3, 4. Let your body sink a little deeper into the bed. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw soften. Let your hands rest heavy and still. You are safe right now. You are warm right now. This is your home, your bed, your night. Nothing out there can reach you. Nothing in this story can hurt you. You are only visiting the way a dream visits, lightly, gently, and always free to leave whenever you drift off. Tonight's story is longer than the one I told you before. We're going to move slowly through many nights, many seasons, many small lives, because there is no need to hurry. The whole point of tonight is slowness. The whole point of tonight is staying a little longer in each quiet moment until it carries you under. I'll keep talking for a long while, and whenever you're ready, in 5 minutes or in 50, you can simply let go and drift off. You won't miss anything. You don't need to hold on to a single word. Just let it carry you the way a river carries a leaf, without any effort on the leaf's part at all. Part 1. Returning to a colder world. Imagine time flowing backward, like a river reversing its course, water gathering itself up and pulling back toward its source. Cities dissolve into fields, roads soften into footpaths, then disappear into grass. Lights go out one by one, gently, the way a house goes dark, room by room, at the end of an evening. We drift further and further back, 1,000 years, 5,000, 10,000, 25,000 years into the past. There are no clocks here, no calendars, no maps drawn on paper, no walls of glass and steel. Only earth, only wind, only ice, and the long patient turning of the seasons. The world looks different in this age. There are no countries, no cities, only open plains stretching from one horizon to the other, blanketed in snow, swept endlessly by wind that has been blowing, more or less unbroken, since before anyone alive can remember. In the distance, walls of glacier catch the light and glow a strange, pale blue, like something lit from within. The sky's often gray, heavy and low, pressing down close to the earth. But sometimes on the clearest, coldest nights, it opens into something startlingly deep, and the stars burn so bright it feels as though you could reach up and close your hand around one. Feel its cold light between your fingers. In this world, a human being is very small. No cities have been built to hold back the wind. No walls raised high enough to keep the cold entirely at bay. Only small groups, families, really, 10 people, 15, sometimes 20 or 30, bound to one another by need, by debt, by long habit, by something that might, if they had the word for it, be called love. Tonight, we are going to visit one such group, and we are going to stay with them for a long, long while, through many nights, through the turning of an entire year, and even if you are still awake to hear it, into the years that follow. Their names don't matter to us. Not really, they're just sounds now. Breaths carried off by the wind of thousands of years. Syllables that meant everything to the people who used them and mean nothing at all to the great quiet distance of time. But their lives, ordinary as they were, still have something to give us. A kind of patience. A kind of company across an impossible distance. You don't have to do anything with any of this. You don't need to remember it, or make sense of it, or hold on to it in any way. Just listen. Just drift. Just let yourself go, further and further, toward sleep. The way the light itself is going, right now. Somewhere on the other side of the world, sinking slowly toward another long night. Part 2, the shape of the alien deep. Before we return to our small group by their fire, let's spend a little time simply looking at the land they live in, because the land itself is part of the story. And there is no need to rush toward the people when the world around them is this quiet, this vast, this good to rest your mind upon. Picture, if you can, a great plain stretching out under a pale sky. This is not the kind of landscape most of us know now. No trees crowding close together, no soft green undergrowth. Instead, low grasses and hardy shrubs cling to the ground, bent flat by generations of wind. Here and there, a stunted, twisted tree holds on in a sheltered hollow, its branches shaped entirely by the direction the wind has always come from. The ground itself is often frozen deep down, even in the warmer months, a permanent cold sleeping just beneath the surface, so that only the top layer of soil ever really thaws, ever really lives. Where water moves, it moves slowly, in braided channels across the flat land, silver under the gray sky. In winter, these channels freeze solid, and you can walk across water that, months before, was rushing and cold and alive. Herds move across this landscape in great, slow rhythms. Woolly mammoths, tall and shaggy, moving in loose family groups, matriarchs at the front, reindeer in their thousands, flowing like a single dark river across the white ground, following paths worn into memory over centuries. Wild horses, sturdy and thick-coated, grazing wherever the wind has swept the snow thin enough to expose grass beneath. Bison, heavy-shouldered, unbothered by cold that would kill an unprepared human within hours. And moving among all of this, small, upright, endlessly resourceful, the humans, the tiny bands of people, watching the herds, reading the sky, learning the wind by heart, generation after generation, the way you might learn the sound of your own house settling at night, until it holds no fear for you at all. I want you to hold this whole landscape gently in your mind now. The wide white plains, the slow rivers under ice, the herds like shadows moving on snow, the low gray sky stretching over everything. Let it become as familiar to you in this moment as your own ceiling, your own walls, your own dark, quiet room. There is nothing here that can hurt you. There is only space and cold and the patient turning of days. Breathe with it. Let your chest rise and fall the way the land itself seems to rise and fall in long, slow waves under the sky. And now, heavier now, slower now. Number hash part 3, sunset and PRITRO, and the sun begins to sink behind the horizon. The light fades slowly, gold turning to gray, gray deepening into something darker, something with weight to it. The wind changes. The gentle daytime air becomes something sharper, something with edges, something that finds its way in through the smallest gap in your clothing. The cold arrives a little more with every passing minute, the way water rises in a container, so gradually you almost don't notice until it's nearly at the top. The group knows this hour well. This is the hour of preparation, and it has its own particular rhythm, worn smooth by repetition. The way a path becomes smooth from years of footsteps. Someone gathers the last scraps of fuel, bent roots pulled from frozen ground with careful, patient tugging, dry branches snapped from low bushes. Sometimes even dried animal dung when wood runs short, because nothing that can burn is wasted. Nothing is considered beneath use when the night is this cold and this long. Someone else tightens the hide coverings, checking each seam, each overlap, sealing the openings of the shelter against the coming night with the unhurried attention of someone who has done this so many times. Their hands know the work better than their mind does. The children are already inside, tucked beneath furs, obeying the quiet instructions of the adults without a word, the way children do when they have learned, early and completely, that the adults around them know something true and important about staying alive. This shelter is not simple. It's the product of generations of trial and error, refined slowly over lifetimes, the way a smooth stone is refined by years of water passing over it. The ground has been dug a little below the surface, into a shallow pit that helps hold in warmth. Gray curved bones, perhaps from a mammoth that fed this group, or one that fed their parents, or their parents before them, arch overhead like the ribs of some ancient cathedral, lashed together with sinew, layered thick with hide. Snow has been packed deliberately around the base to keep the wind out, banked up in low mounds that will, by morning, be frozen solid, an accidental fortress. A small opening at the top lets smoke escape, positioned with the practiced eye of people who have learned, through trial and smoke-filled era, exactly where a vent needs to sit to draw properly without letting in too much cold. Inside, a small fire is already burning. Someone kept yesterday's embers alive beneath a careful blanket of ash, and now they coax them gently back to life, feeding them dry moss first, so light it barely seems solid at all, then thin twigs, then slightly thicker ones. Watching the flame grow the way you might watch a small animal wake from sleep, patiently, without startling it. As you picture all of this, remember your own body too. There is warmth around you as well, right now, in your own bed, in your own dark room. Your blanket, your pillow, the quiet of your own space. This is your own shelter tonight, built not from bone and hide, but from everything that makes you feel safe. You need nothing else, only rest. Breathe slowly. Let your body grow heavier. Let your arms, your legs feel loose and unbound. The way rope goes soft and slack once the weight it was holding has finally been set down. Part 4 fire and FAMIO with the inside of the shelter grows warmer now. Filling slowly, the way a room fills with the smell of bread baking. Invisible but unmistakable. The fire climbs, casting dancing shadows across the bones and hides above. Shapes that shift and stretch and settle again. Never quite still, never quite frightening either, just alive. The way firelight always is. The air smells faintly of smoke, of old leather worn soft by years of handling, of something faintly sweet from the burning wood, and underneath it all, the particular smell of many bodies gathered close together in a small warm space. A smell that means, more than anything else could, that you are not alone. A woman sits near the fire, roasting strips of meat left over from yesterday's hunt on a flat stone that has absorbed so much heat over so many nights that it holds its warmth long after the flames beneath it die down. The smell is rich, heavy with fat, not exactly pleasant to a stranger's nose, perhaps, but the most wonderful smell in the world to people who are hungry, who have walked far and worked hard and earned. In the oldest and simplest sense, every calorie that smell promises. Roots soften in a shallow bowl of heated water nearby, their pale flesh turning slowly tender. Everything is portioned out quietly, with a kind of calm. Practiced fairness that is never needed to be written down as a rule, because it has simply always been done this way, and everyone understands why. Someone pulls a child close. The small body trembles faintly under the furs, not from fear, just from the particular cold that clings to small bodies until the fire has had time to do its slow work, and then slowly settles as warmth spreads between them. An arm wraps around its shoulder without any real thought behind the gesture at all. It is as automatic as breathing. Two bodies share their heat, and both become a little warmer for it. The way the candles burning close together seem, somehow, to throw more light than either would alone. This is something you can feel too, right now. Under your blanket, your body is warm, heavy, safe. It's almost as if you, too, are sitting by this fire, among this family, welcome without ever having had to ask. No one is asking anything of you. No one expects you to hunt, or gather, or watch through the night. You are simply here, warm, resting, and that is entirely enough. Food is shared. Everyone receives their portion, a piece of meat, a handful of cooked root, perhaps a little marrow cracked from a bone, rich and strange tasting and precious. There isn't much talking, because breath is precious here, in cold thin air, and shouldn't be wasted on words that the wind will only carry away unheard. Only the occasional murmur, a soft instruction given to a child, a quiet exchange between two people who have shared 10,000 quiet exchanges before this one, and will share 10,000 more. Outside, last light disappears completely, the sky closing over like an eye. Someone pulls a heavy hide across the entrance and weighs it down with stones gathered specifically for this purpose. Stones that live beside the entrance permanently, doing this one small job every single night without complaint. The air inside now feels entirely different from the sharp, biting cold outside. A soft, heavy warmth gathered around the fire, thick enough almost to touch. You are inside that same soft warmth now. Your body grows heavier. Your thoughts slow down, blur together at the edges, and simply drift. The way smoke drifts upward and spreads out and disappears into the dark, without ever really going anywhere at all. Part 5, the fire KE. A young man, perhaps 20 winters old, though no one counts with any real precision, has been given the duty of tending the fire. He sits close to the flames, feeding each branching carefully, never letting the fire grow too large, never letting it shrink too small, holding a balance that has no name but that his hands understand completely. It is a task no one notices, And yet it matters more than almost anything else that happens tonight. A quiet wakefulness that lasts the whole night through, unglamorous, unremarked upon, essential. If the fire dies, the coal will come flooding in, patient and absolute. If it burns too fast, there will be no wood left by morning. In the cold hours before dawn, the coldest of the whole night will arrive with nothing left to meet them. So he holds his balance for hours, even as sleep tugs at the edges of his mind, pulling gently, the way the current pulls at something caught near the edge of a slow river. His face glows orange in the firelight, lit from below in a way that makes him look, for these few hours, like something out of an old story. Though to himself he feels nothing but tired and useful and quietly proud in a way. He wouldn't have words for it, even if someone asked him to explain it. His eyes are half closed but still watchful, moving now and then to the woodpile, to the flames, to the dark shapes of sleeping bodies around him. The others glance at him now and then with a quiet, unspoken gratitude that never quite becomes words, because words aren't needed for something everyone understands as completely. Tomorrow night, the duty will pass to someone else. This is a weight everyone carries in turn, a burden no one can escape. And, in a strange way, no one truly minds, because it is one of the few things in this hard world that is shared out fairly. Night after night, person after person, down through years of winters. Now picture this fire in your own mind. Listen to its soft crackle, the small sharp pop of sap catching, the long slow hiss of green wood giving up its moisture to the heat. Watch the light dance along the curved bones above, climbing and falling, never repeating itself exactly. Watch the shadows shift across the hide walls, soft edge, almost like the shadows a nightlight throws across a child's bedroom ceiling, familiar, comforting, part of the architecture of feeling safe. Your own eyes may be growing heavy now too. That's exactly as it should be. Don't resist it. Just watch, and watch, and watch, and let yourself go a little further with every breath. The way the firekeeper's own eyes grow heavier as his long watch goes on, and on, and on, into the deep unmeasured hours of the night. Part 6. The sounds of the NIGHT outside. The wind begins to rise. You can hear it moving across the open plain, a low, steady moan that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The way certain sounds seem to fill an entire dark room without ever quite locating themselves anywhere specific. It brushes against the hide walls, finds small gaps, whistles faintly through the smoke hole above, a thin, high note laid over the deeper moan of the open wind, like two instruments playing very different parts of the same slow, endless song. The sound is strangely soothing. Once you stop fighting it and simply let it be what it is, it fills the silence with a kind of rhythm, a kind of continuity, proof that the world outside is still turning, even while everyone inside rests. Every now and then, other sounds drift in the distant crack of shifting ice, sharp and sudden, like a whip cracked far away. Then silence again, the faint call of some animal moving in the dark, more curious than frightening once, as everyone here knows, exactly what kind of creature makes exactly what kind of sound. The soft settling crunch of snow under its own weight, somewhere out on the plain, a sound so gentle it's almost imagined. The people inside don't react to any of this. They know these sounds the way you know the particular creak of your own stairs. The particular hum of your own refrigerator at night sounds so familiar. They've stopped being sounds at all and become simply part of the texture of safety. They can sort them without thinking, know instantly which ones need attention and which don't need attention at all. The night outside is its own world, one they can't control, and, having learned this lesson many winters ago, don't try to. You can hear these same sounds now, in your mind, if you let yourself. The moan of the wind, the crackle of the fire, the deep quiet stretching out beyond it all, vast and patient and, in its own strange way, kind. None of it is dangerous to you either. It's only the night, breathing the way it has always breathed. Long before you were born, and long after every fire in this story has gone cold and been forgotten. Your eyelids feel heavier now. Your body is sinking further into the blanket, the pillow, the bed. You're not quite awake, and not quite asleep. You're somewhere in between, somewhere soft and safe. And that is exactly where I'm going to take you now, a little further, a little deeper, with every slow sentence. Part 7, Half-Dreamed Memories. In this in-between place, the mind begins to wander freely, the way water wanders once it's released from a narrow channel into open ground, spreading out in whatever direction offers the least resistance. It drifts back to a hunt from a few days ago, the particular angle of a spear thrown well, the particular silence of a held breath before the throw. It moves forward toward tomorrow's small tasks, a hide that needs scraping, a tool that needs resetting, a child who needs watching. It slips sideways into half-formed images, memories, perhaps, or maybe dreams. The line between the two blurring the way it always does in this soft, unmeasured hour. Faces appear, people no longer here. Their features already softened by time, the way a face softens when you try to remember it after many years. Details slipping away first, then whole expressions, until only a feeling remains, warm or sad, or both at once. The warmth of some summer day returns for a moment, a warmth that won't come back again for many months. Remembered so vividly it's almost physical, almost real enough to make the current cold seem briefly like a mistake, a wrong turn that will surely correct itself soon. You stir faintly just enough to notice the fire is still glowing, that the breathing beside you is still slow and steady. Two small facts that are somehow enough, on their own, to allow the mind to let go again completely. Then your eyes close again, and you let the darkness settle back over you. The way a blanket settles when you stop holding its edge and simply let it fall. The night stretches on. The hours pass, not measured by any clock, because there are no clocks here, but by the slow burning down of the wood, log becoming coal, becoming ash, by the gradual cooling of the air near the entrance where the cold presses hardest against the hide, by the quiet shifting of sleeping bodies finding new angles of comfort against the hard ground beneath the furs. Someone coughs softly, just once, then settles. Someone else murmurs something in their sleep, a name, perhaps, or nothing at all, just a sound a sleeping mind makes without meaning behind it. The firekeeper adds another branch, and the flames rise briefly before settling back into their steady glow. A small punctuation mark in the long unbroken sentence of the night. Let yourself fall into that same rhythm now. Breathe in and let go. Breathe in and let go. With every breath, a little heavier, a little quieter, a little further away from the room you're lying in, and a little closer to somewhere else entirely. Somewhere warm, somewhere dark, somewhere that asks nothing of you at all. Part 8. The story of Ottu. Okay, let me tell you now about an old man in this group, because every group like this one carries at least one person who has lived long enough to become something more than just a person, something closer to a kind of living memory, walking slowly among the rest. His name, if it matters at all, sounded something like Ottuk, though the exact sound has long since dissolved into the wind that carried it. He had seen perhaps 40 winters, which in this world made him remarkably, almost improbably old enough that the younger hunters sometimes looked at him the way you might look at a very old tree, with a kind of wondering respect, trying to imagine everything it must have lived through simply to still be standing. His face carried the record of those 40 winters openly, the way certain landscapes carry the record of long weather, deep lines at the eyes and mouth, skin roughened by decades of wind and cold, and the particular kind of sun that reflects blindingly off endless snow. His hands were marked by old scars, souvenirs of a lifetime spent working stone and hide and bone, each scar with its own small forgotten story behind it. But his eyes remained sharp, clear, missing very little, the way the eyes of people who have survived a great deal often stay sharp long after the rest of the body has begun to soften and slow. He moved carefully now, conserving effort in a way that younger people didn't yet need to. He had learned, the hard way, over many winters, exactly how much energy could be spent and exactly how much needed to be saved, and he no longer wasted a single motion. Every gesture was economical, deliberate, the polished result of decades of trial and error. He rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened in a particular way, not out of fear, but out of a sense that whatever he said had been considered carefully before being offered, and was therefore worth the small effort of attention. One night, sitting near the fire with the young firekeeper we met earlier, Ottuk began speaking without being asked. Not loudly, not like a formal telling of a tale, but simply as an observation, offered into the quiet, the way you might mention the weather. He spoke of other winters he had lived through, winters when food had been even scarcer than this one, when whole groups had vanished into the cold and never been seen again, swallowed by distance and weather and bad luck in ways that left no trace behind for anyone to mourn properly. He spoke of patience, of not wasting energy on anything that didn't need it, of trusting the patterns that had kept people alive for generation after generation before either of them had been born. The firekeeper listened, without answering. He understood, somehow, that this wasn't really a conversation. It was a kind of teaching, passed along not through direct instruction, but through quiet example and occasional carefully chosen words. When Ottuk finished, no one responded. The fire crackled, the wind blew, and everyone present understood, in their own way, what had been said, and let the silence that followed hold it. The way silence sometimes holds the most important things far better than words ever could, right? I want you to picture that silence now, filling the space after Ottuk's words the way water fills a container, taking whatever shape the moment offers. Let a similar silence fill your own mind now. No need for words, no need for thoughts, even just quiet, deep and soft, settling over you the way it settled over that fire so many thousands of years ago. Part 9, the deepest HOU. The night has reached its coldest point now, the hour furthest from both sunset and sunrise, when the accumulated cold of the whole long night finally settles fully into the world. In these hours before dawn, the world feels at its most frozen, its most still, as though even the wind has finally grown tired and settled down to rest alongside everyone else. Inside the shelter, bodies have drawn close together, sharing warmth and patterns learned across countless generations, arranged almost like the pieces of some slow, patient puzzle that has been solved the same way, with only minor variations, for longer than anyone can say. An old man lies with his back to the fire, wrapped in the thickest furs available to him, a quiet privilege of age that no one begrudges him. A young mother nurses her baby beneath a pile of skins, the baby's small sounds barely audible over the wind, a soft counterpoint to the larger, harsher music of the night outside. Two hunters sleep side by side, their breathing perfectly in step with one another. The way people's breathing sometimes falls into sync after years of shared hardship, shared work, shared trust. The firekeeper stays awake, alone in his quiet watch, eyes fixed patiently on the flames, occasionally scanning the dark shapes around him with the particular tenderness of someone responsible. For these few hours, for every single person in this small warm space, in this hour, you can feel yourself in the safest, most protected place of all. Everyone around you is watching over you, even if they don't know your name, even if they lived and died tens of thousands of years before you were ever born. The fire is keeping you warm. There is nothing left to fear, nothing left to plan for, nothing left to do at all except exactly what you're doing right now, resting, breathing, letting go. Now, a dream begins to form, a sunlit plain, grass green and soft underfoot, the air warm against your skin in a way that feels almost unfamiliar after so much cold. In the distance, animals move slowly across the land, deer, horses, bison, grazing without hurry, without fear, because in this dream there is no need for either. There is no cold here, no hunger, no ache in the joints, no numbness creeping into fingers and toes. There is only warmth and soft ground and endless, unhurried time. This is a place the mind is built for memory and longing, a brief escape from the reality of winter, a gift the body gives itself in exchange for enduring what it must endure the rest of the time. And you can stay inside this dream for as long as you like, drifting deeper into it with every breath. The grass growing greener, the sun growing warmer, the whole scene becoming more solid and more real the longer you allow yourself to rest inside it. Part 10. Morning comes as the black of night begins to soften into gray. The way ink diffuses slowly through water, the change so gradual, it's hard to say exactly when it began. A thin light starts to seep through the small gaps in the hide walls, faint at first, then slowly, patiently stronger. The firekeeper, his face pale with exhaustion, but carrying a quiet satisfaction underneath the tiredness, wakes the next person and quietly passes on the duty. A few murmured words, a nod, nothing more ceremonial than that. He curls up near the fire, pulls a hide over himself, and falls almost instantly into a deep, dreamless sleep. the particular deep sleep that comes only after a long, successfully completed watch. Slowly, the shelter begins to stir. Someone opens the entrance a little, and cold, sharp air pours in, startling after the night's accumulated warmth, but welcomed in its own way, proof that the world outside still exists, still turns, still offers each new day freshly. Regardless of how the last one went, outside, the world is white, the sky pale gray, brightening slowly toward something that might, later, become blue. The landscape is calm, motionless, holding no sign at all of the wind that howled across it just hours before. Another night has passed. Like so many nights before it, this one has been survived too. There's no celebration, no sense of triumph, no particular acknowledgement beyond the simple fact of everyone waking, moving, beginning again. Only the quiet, steady knowledge that tomorrow, all of this will happen again. The gathering, the fire, the watch, the long cold hours, the slow gray morning. And within that repetition, strangely, a kind of peace. The peace of knowing exactly what is coming and exactly how to meet it. But this isn't your night to survive. Your night is still going on, and you are already warm, already safe, held by something far gentler than hide and bone and careful rationed fire. There's no task waiting for you, no duty to carry, no watch to keep. You can simply keep sleeping, drifting further with every breath. While somewhere far behind you in time, that ancient morning goes on unfolding exactly as it always has. Part 11, The Shape of One LIF. Let me tell you about one person now. A little more slowly this time, because there is no need to rush through a life. Even one lived so long ago it can only be imagined rather than truly known. His name doesn't matter, it's just a sound, a breath. Syllables that meant something once and now mean only a person who lived. But the shape of his life has something to teach us, if we're willing to sit quietly with it for a while. He grew up near the valley where he was born, in a group not so different from the one we've been visiting tonight. Perhaps it was even the same one, seen at an earlier point in its long, slow story. He wasn't the strongest hunter, or the wisest elder, or the most skilled toolmaker. He wasn't remarkable in any way that would have made his name worth remembering, if names from that time had survived at all, which of course, they haven't. He was simply present. He did what needed doing, day after day, season after season, and that, in the end, was enough. It is, perhaps, always enough. In the mornings, he shaped tools from flint, sitting near the entrance where the light was best, a small pile of raw stone beside him, cutting blades, spear points, scrapers for working hide. Each one required real patience, real attention. The work demanded a kind of focus that left no room for anything else. Every strike landing with exactly the right force, not too hard, not too soft, the difference between a useful tool and a wasted, shattered piece of stone, often no more than the width of a hair's breadth of pressure. In the afternoons, when weather allowed, he joined the hunting parties. They hunted small animals, mostly hares, ptarmigan sometimes, if they were lucky and patient and the wind cooperated, a deer. Long walks across open ground, long stretches of tracking and waiting, broken by brief, sudden moments of action that were over almost before they began. Most days ended with little to show for the effort. A few days ended with enough to matter for a week. In the evenings, he helped with other work, scraping hides until his arms ached in a way that had become so familiar it barely registered as discomfort anymore. Teaching children how to shape stone, guiding their small hands toward the right angle, the right pressure, mending torn clothing by firelight with a bone needle and sinew thread, each stitch small and careful. As his hands worked, his mind wandered freely through memories, through half-formed thoughts, sometimes through nothing at all, simply resting in the rhythm of repeated motion, the way a mind can rest inside any task performed often enough to no longer require conscious thought. It was a simple, repetitive life, built from the same handful of tasks performed again and again across thousands of days. But within that repetition, there were moments of meaning to a glance, shared across the fire with someone who understood, without being told, exactly what a long day had cost him. A smile from a child who had finally shaped a stone tool correctly on her own after many failed attempts. A successful day of hunting that meant, for a little while at least, that no one would go to sleep hungry. These moments weren't quite happiness, Not in the way we might use that word now, but they were something proof that life, even a life this hard, was never only about survival. You can think of your own life this way too, if it helps. Simple, repeating days, each one holding small moments of meaning inside it. Easy to overlook in the middle of a busy week, but visible clearly enough now. In this quiet, dark room, if you let your mind rest on them for a moment. Tonight, though, you don't need to think about tomorrow's tasks at all, or last week's either. This is your time. Time to rest, fully, completely, without earning it or working toward it. It is simply yours. Number hash, part 12. The story of Sarah. There was a young woman in this group too. Let's call her, for the sake of the story, by a sound something like Sarah. Though of course we can't know what she was truly called. She had a particular skill with plant fibers, quick and certain hands that could turn rough, stubborn material into cord and netting almost before you'd finished watching her begin. She was younger than the man we just spoke of, by perhaps 3 winters, and she carried something he sometimes found himself quietly envying, a kind of lightness, an ease of spirit that the hardship all around her never seemed entirely able to wear down, no matter how long or how hard the winter. When she smiled, which she did rarely, but genuinely, it seemed to change the whole feeling of the shelter, the way a single beam of sunlight breaking through a heavy cloud changes the whole feeling of a gray day, out of all proportion to how small a thing it really is. Sometimes she would sit beside him while he worked, saying very little. There wasn't a habit of unnecessary talk among people who spent every day together, whose lives were already so thoroughly interwoven that words often felt almost redundant. But there was a comfort in her presence, a quiet companionship that needed no words at all to sustain itself. Sometimes their eyes would meet across the fire, and something wordless would pass between them, perhaps a kind of acknowledgement, perhaps simply a shared understanding of the life they were both living, side by side, day after day, winter after winter. On one particularly cold night, she moved closer to him near the fire, and after a long, comfortable silence, without looking at him directly, placed a small, carefully wrapped bundle in his hands. Inside was a length of cord she had made herself, dyed in dark and light patterns using plant pigments, intricate and strong, and beautiful in a way that had nothing at all to do with survival. It was beautiful simply because beauty itself, in a hard world, is its own small act of quiet defiance against everything that world is trying to take from you. He looked at the cord, then at her, and nodded his thanks, tying it around his wrist, a small connecting mark that would remain there, slowly fading, for years afterward, long after the specific night that created it had blurred into all the other nights around it. I tell you this small story now, because it holds something worth carrying with you, and to sleep the knowledge that even in circumstances built almost entirely around hardship, people still find room, somehow, for small gestures of tenderness, for tiny, private acts of beauty meant for no one but each other. Let that knowledge settle over you now, warm and simple. You don't need anything grand to feel comforted. Sometimes the smallest gesture, offered quietly, is enough to carry someone through an entire winter. Part 13. The long journey. One particular winter, harder than most, deserves its own telling, slowly, because there is no need to hurry through hardship any more than through peace, and because hearing how difficulty was met, calmly and patiently, so long ago, can be its own kind of quiet reassurance now. The cold came early that year and stayed late. Snow fell deeper than in previous years, deep enough to change the shape of familiar ground entirely, burying the low shrubs that usually offered fuel, burying the paths worn smooth by years of familiar footsteps. The herds that normally grazed within a day's walk of the group's home valley moved on, following some instinct or pattern of their own, drawn toward ground the people simply couldn't reach. Food stores dwindled steadily, and every morning arrived carrying a fresh, quiet weight of worry, a tightness in the chest that came from knowing, without needing to say it aloud, that reserves were running low. The children grew thinner, their eyes appearing larger in their narrowing faces. The old moved more slowly, conserving what strength remained to them. Everyone understood, without discussion, exactly what this winter demanded of them. So a group of 4, including the man from our earlier story, and Ottuk, the old hunter whose memory stretched back across so many winters, and 2 others decided to travel further than they normally would, following the frozen river downstream toward a place where the forest grew thicker, where more fuel and, they hoped, more game might be found. It might take several days. It might take longer. They prepared carefully, packing dried meat and fat, extra furs for warmth, their best tools and weapons, moving with the unhurried thoroughness of people who understand that a mistake made in preparation cannot easily be corrected once the journey has begun. They left early one morning while the sky was still clear, walking in a single file through snow that sometimes reached their knees. The rest of the group watched them go without ceremony, without any grand farewell, only a brief held glance, a silent exchange that said more than words could have. And then the travelers turned and walked on, and the ones who stayed turned back toward the fire. The journey was exhausting in a way that went beyond simple tiredness. The cold pressed in from every direction, relentless, patient, testing every gap in their clothing, every moment of carelessness. At night, they built small fires that never felt like enough, sleep coming only in broken, shallow fragments, interrupted constantly by cold and by the instinctive habit of listening for danger, even in half-sleep. On the 3rd day, they found what they were looking for, a rocky overhang that offered real shelter, deep enough to block the worst of the wind, with fallen dead trees scattered generously nearby. Better still, at the base of the overhang, they discovered a natural hollow the wind had carved into a deep snowbank, forming something almost like a small cave. Working together, they reinforced it, cutting branches to strengthen the walls, packing snow around it for insulation, building a proper fire pit from stones arranged in a rough circle. The work itself warmed them, blood moving again through cold, stiffened limbs. That night, for the first time in days, they built a real fire, fed generously with dry wood, and felt for the first time, in what felt like a very long while, genuinely warm. They ate slowly, letting the meal settle, letting the warmth work its way into muscles that had forgotten what warmth even felt like. That night, the man from our story slept more deeply than he had in weeks. Outside, the wind continued, with the snow walls held firm, and the fire burned steadily, tended in careful shifts. He dreamed of nothing in particular, only a deep, welcome absence of struggle, the purest kind of rest there is. They stayed 5 more days in that small shelter, gathering as much wood as they could carry, resting properly for the first time in a long while. During this time, Ottuk spoke more than usual, sharing quiet observations about winters even harder than this one, about patience, about trusting patterns that had kept people alive for longer than any single memory could hold. The younger man listened carefully, understanding that something important was being passed to him, quietly, the way important things in this world were always passed, not through lecture, but through calm, patient example. The journey home was easier than the journey out, the load heavier, but their bodies rested, the path already familiar beneath their feet. When at last they saw the distant shapes of their home valley's cliffs rising on the horizon, a quiet relief settled over all 4 of them, not joy exactly, but something close to it, the simple rightness of returning to where you belong. The group welcomed them back without great ceremony. Food was shared, wood was stored, life resumed its familiar rhythm. But something in the younger man had shifted during that journey, a settled understanding of endurance, of patience, of the quiet, unglamorous work of creating warmth in places that offered none to begin with. He had learned that he could endure more than he had believed, that the body could be pushed well beyond what the mind initially assumed were its limits, and that this knowledge, once gained, never entirely left you again. Let this story settle over you now, the way it settled over him, not as tension, not as difficulty to dwell on, but as a quiet kind of reassurance. If people could endure that and rest afterward this deeply, this completely, then surely you, warm and safe in your own bed, with no such hardship pressing on you at all, can allow yourself exactly this same depth of rest tonight. Number # part 14, the fire that went out and came back one night back at the home shelter. A young boy, barely more than a boy at all, perhaps 15 winters old, had been given the duty of tending the fire, eager, as young people often are, to prove himself capable of a responsibility usually given to those a little older. But he was worn out from a long day's work, legs aching from hours of walking, and in the darkest hour of the night, despite every intention to stay alert, he fell asleep, his head slowly dropping, his careful watch dissolving quietly into unconsciousness. The fire went out. The embers cooled, one small ember at a time, until nothing remained but gray ash and cold stone. The cold seeped in from every direction, patient and thorough, finding every gap, every seam, every place warmth had been keeping it at bay. Someone woke with a deep sudden shiver, a cold reaching further into the body than any cold should be able to reach inside a shelter like this one. Seeing the fire dead, they moved instantly, without pausing, even to fully understand what had happened. Others began to stir too, woken by the same wrongness, the same absence where warmth should have been. They worked quickly, moving with the practiced urgency of people who understand exactly what is at stake. From a small reserve of embers kept in a separate pit, just for moments exactly like this one, a lesson learned some other winter, in some other crisis, and carried forward ever since. They coaxed the flame back to life. Dry moss first, so light it seemed barely solid. Gentle, careful breath, over and over. Patience, even in the urgency of the moment. Slowly, painstakingly, a small flame returned, then grew, then became something that could properly be called a fire again. The crisis passed. Warmth returned to the shelter, spreading slowly back into the cold corners it had briefly abandoned. But everyone understood, in that moment, just how thin the line truly was between an ordinary night and disaster, how a single mistake, an entirely human, entirely understandable lapse, could have cost far more than anyone wanted to think about. The boy was crushed by his own mistake, sitting apart from the others afterward, his head in his hands, unable to look at anyone. No one spoke to him harshly. There was, in truth, nothing harsh to say, only the quiet, heavy fact of what had almost happened, settling over the whole group like a held breath. But the next morning, the man from our earlier stories sat beside him, without being asked, and told him about a mistake of his own, made long ago on a hunt, a trap set carelessly, an animal lost that shouldn't have been. He said that failing is part of learning, that everyone who has ever done difficult, necessary work has, at some point, failed at it. What matters, he said, is letting the memory of a mistake keep you alert afterward, rather than letting it convince you that you are somehow unfit for the responsibility altogether. The boy listened, and something in his face slowly softened. He nodded, understanding, without needing to be told directly, that he wasn't being cast out, that another chance would come, as it always did. For everyone. The man also showed him something few others knew about, a second, smaller reserve pit, kept apart from the first, doubling their protection against exactly this kind of failure. A small piece of knowledge that might, someday, save a life. He passed it on the way it had been passed on to him, without ceremony, simply because it needed to continue existing somewhere beyond his own memory. This story tells us something true, something worth carrying with you now that everyone stumbles. Sometimes, even when trying their hardest, even when the stakes are as high as they can possibly be, that everyone needs someone else to lean on, afterward, when the weight of a mistake feels too heavy to carry alone. Tonight, you don't need to be perfect either. You don't need to have gotten everything right today, or this week, or ever. You just need to be here, breathing, resting, letting the small failures of your own days settle quietly into the past where they belong. Part 15. The child called Lena on the children in this group was a girl of about 8 winters, whose mother had died the previous winter during childbirth, a loss common enough in this hard world that the group had long since developed quiet, practiced ways of absorbing it without ever making it feel any less painful for the child at its center. As was the custom, she was raised collectively by whoever had room, whoever had patience, whoever happened to be nearby on a given day. Let's call her Lena, for the sake of this telling. She had serious, watchful eyes, the particular seriousness of a child who has already learned, earlier than she should have had to, that the world does not always protect the people you love, no matter how much you need it to. The man from our earlier story spent time with her often, teaching her, patiently, the fundamentals of fire, how to tell dry moss from damp by touch alone, even in darkness, how to shape thin kindling that would catch easily, how to breathe gently on embers without scattering the ash that protected them. She watched him with total concentration, practicing each motion carefully, asking occasional small, quiet questions in a voice that never rose much above a whisper. He answered patiently, every time, remembering clearly the moments when these same lessons had been given to him by someone else, beside some other fire, in some other winter, and understanding, with a clarity that surprised him, that this knowledge passing from his hands to hers was perhaps the most important thing he would do all year. One evening, after weeks of practice, Lena managed to coax a small flame into being entirely on her own, without help, without correction, just her small, careful hands and the quiet knowledge she'd absorbed, patiently, night after night. She looked up at him with an expression somewhere between pride and disbelief, as though she herself couldn't quite trust what her own hands had just accomplished. He nodded at her, a small warm acknowledgement, and something passed between them that needed no further words, the particular satisfaction of watching knowledge take root successfully in someone new, of knowing that a small, essential skill will now continue existing in the world a little longer than it otherwise might have, carried forward by hands too young, just a season ago, to have managed it at all. This is a small story, almost nothing at all in the vast sweep of a whole winter, a whole life, a whole vanished age, but I want you to hold it gently now, because it holds something true about all of us, the quiet way knowledge, care, and warmth move from one person to another, generation after generation, so slowly and so constantly that it becomes almost invisible, the way the movement of very slow water becomes invisible if you don't watch closely enough. You too have received things this way from people who came before you, whether or not you remember the exact moment of receiving them, and you, too, in your own quiet ways, have likely passed something onward yourself, without ever quite noticing you were doing it. Let that thought rest with you now, warm and simple, as you continue drifting downward, deeper, further, toward sleep. Part 16. Beauty and man-age of the people of the Ice Age didn't live only to survive. They also made beauty, deliberately, patiently, in ways that offered no practical advantage at all, which is perhaps exactly what makes it worth pausing on now, slowly, without hurrying past it the way a busy mind might, on cave walls, in places sunlight never reached. They painted animals, horses, with flowing manes captured in a few confident lines, bison rendered with a heaviness and power that modern artists still study with genuine admiration, mammoths, deer, lions, each animal caught in some characteristic moment of movement or stillness. These paintings required real planning, gathering and grinding pigments from ochre and charcoal, mixing them carefully with fat or water, preparing small stone lamps filled with animal fat, their wicks trimmed just so, carried deep into passages where the dark was so complete it had a kind of weight to it. Someone had to hold that lamp steady for hours while someone else painted, both of them working in a silence broken only by the soft, patient scrape of pigment against stone. Why did they do this? We can only guess gently, without ever being entirely certain. Perhaps it helped them feel a kind of power over the animals they depended on for survival, a symbolic mastery achieved before the real, dangerous mastery of the hunt itself. Perhaps these deep places felt sacred somehow, thin boundaries between the ordinary world and something else, something larger. Perhaps the paintings taught the young how different animals moved, how to recognize danger, how to recognize opportunity, or perhaps, simplest of all, it was simply art, the expression of something in the human mind that has always needed to make beauty, regardless of whether beauty serves any obvious purpose. They carved small flutes from hollow bird bone to drilled with careful, evenly spaced holes. Someone would sit by the fire, on nights not so different from this one, and play them, let them thin. Clear sounds drift out into the cold night air, sounds that some careful, patient part of the mind had decided were pleasing, worth the considerable effort of creating an instrument capable of making them at all. Perhaps it was entertainment, a way to fill long dark hours. Perhaps it was ritual, accompanying practices we can no longer reconstruct. Perhaps it was simply beauty, offered into the night for no reason beyond the simple human need to make something lovely exist where, a moment before, there had only been silence. They shaped small ornaments from stone, bone and shell to pierced beads, carved pendants, objects with no practical use at all, but carefully made, smoothed by long handling, sometimes even repaired carefully when broken. evidence that they mattered to someone in a way that went well beyond their function, because they had no function at all beyond simply existing and being carried and being valued. This tells us something important, something worth carrying gently into your own rest tonight, that people have always needed more than food and warmth, more than simple survival. They have needed beauty, meaning, connection, small objects and small sounds and small images that served no purpose except to make life feel in some quiet way worth the enormous effort of living it. Even in the hardest conditions imaginable, cold that could kill within hours, hunger that never fully went away, uncertainty stretching endlessly into every future they could imagine, people still carved out small pockets of meaning for themselves, insisted on beauty, made room for it deliberately, at real cost, because it mattered enough to be worth that cost. Tonight, you can think of the beauty in your own life too, small moments, people you love, things that bring you comfort, songs that mean something to you, images that have stayed with you for reasons you might not even be able to fully explain. These are your own kind of fire, the things that warm you, that protect you, wherever you go, whatever winter you happen to be moving through in your own life right now. Let yourself rest in that thought for a while, warm and simple, needing no further explanation at all. Part 17, music in the DAR callets. Stay a little longer with the idea of music, because there is something particularly soothing about imagining sound drifting through that ancient darkness, and no reason at all to rush past it toward the next part of the story. Imagine, now, one particular evening, quieter than most, when the wind outside has finally settled into something gentler, less insistent, almost peaceful in its own way. Inside the shelter, most of the group has already settled for the night, some already asleep, others resting quietly, listening to the fire. Someone, perhaps an older woman who has carried this particular flute for many winters, its bone surface worn smooth and pale by years of careful handling, lifts it to her lips. She plays slowly, without hurry, testing a few notes first, adjusting, finding the particular sound that feels right for tonight. The melody that emerges isn't complex. A few notes, repeated with small variations, rising and falling gently, matching almost exactly the pace of a slow, unhurried breath. It isn't meant to entertain in any dramatic way. It's meant simply to fill the quiet with something soft, something human, something that says, without any words at all, that the night is being watched over, that someone is here, present, awake, gently marking the passage of time with sound. The younger listeners, half asleep already, find their breathing slowing further to match the rhythm of the music, the way breathing often does, unconsciously. In the presence of any slow, steady sound, the music becomes for a little while almost indistinguishable from the crackle of the fire, from the low moan of wind outside, from the whole soft texture of the night. One more gentle sound among many, none of them urgent, none of them demanding anything at all beyond simply being heard. I want you to imagine that same music now, drifting quietly through your own dark room, slow and simple, a few notes repeated gently, rising and falling with your own breath. There is nothing you need to do with this music except let it play, let it repeat, let it grow slowly, softer and further away, the way music does when the mind carrying it finally lets go and slips beneath the surface of sleep. Breathe with it now. In, slow, out, slower. Let the melody blur at its edges. Let it fade, gently, the way all good, quiet things eventually fade, not with any loss, only with a kind of soft completion, a sense that they've done exactly what they needed to do. Part 18, the night sky without any artificial light anywhere on the whole vast plain. The night sky above this ancient world would ablaze with a density of stars we can barely imagine now. Accustomed as most of us are to skies dimmed by distant city glow, let's spend some time now simply looking up, together, into that impossible depth of stars. Picture stepping outside the shelter for a moment, not for any urgent reason, just to check the sky, the way people do sometimes, almost without thinking, drawn by some old habit or quiet curiosity. Above you, the stars spread out in such overwhelming numbers that the familiar patterns we use today, the neat constellations we've named and mapped, would seem almost lost among thousands of fainter companions, all of them glittering with a sharp cold clarity that only the driest, coldest air can produce. The people of this world would have known this sky intimately, the way you might know the layout of a house you've lived in your whole life, able to navigate it in complete darkness without a single misstep. They would have watched the moon's slow cycle, waxing and waning, tracking the passage of time in its absence of any other calendar. They likely told stories about the shapes they saw scattered across the darkness, animals, ancestors, perhaps beings and forces we no longer have any way of imagining. Stories passed down by voice alone, changing slightly with each telling, evolving the way all living stories evolve, until eventually, when the last person who knew them died, they simply stopped, leaving no trace behind at all except this, the certainty that stories like this must have existed, must have been told, on nights exactly like this one. Standing beneath that enormous sky, a single person would have felt very small indeed, and also, in some strange way, that comfort and vastness sometimes produced together, entirely held. The same stars that had watched over their grandparents watched over them too. The same slow wheel of the sky, turning through the seasons with perfect, indifferent reliability, offered a kind of company that required nothing at all in return. I want you to imagine that sky now, spread out above your own closed eyes, dense with stars, silent, patient, utterly indifferent to anything you might be worried about, utterly unbothered by whatever small concerns followed you into bed tonight. Whatever's on your mind, that ancient sky doesn't need you to solve it right now. It's simply there, the way it's always been there, offering nothing but its own quiet, endless presence. Let your own mind spread out the way that sky spreads out, wide, dark, scattered gently with soft, unhurried thoughts that don't need Let it go on, until it simply dissolves into sleep. The way even the brightest star eventually fades from view as morning comes. Part 19. The animals they lived. Relationship between these people and the animals around them was far more complicated than simple hunting alone. And it's worth spending some quiet time now considering it, slowly, the way you might turn over any complicated thing in your hands, examining it from several sides before setting it down again. The animals were food. Certainly the difference, quite literally, between survival and starvation. But they were also dangerous, powerful, possessed of qualities the people themselves must have admired even as they depended on overcoming them. A mammoth, enormous and seemingly unstoppable, could nonetheless be brought down through human intelligence and cooperation. A victory that must have carried a very particular kind of awe within it. A cave lion, a predator capable of killing a person without much effort at all, was also graceful, efficient, perfectly suited to the harsh world it inhabited, qualities that showed clearly, again and again, in the careful, respectful way these animals were painted deep inside the caves, rendered with what looks, even now, unmistakably like admiration. The act of hunting itself likely carried a ritual weight far beyond its simple, practical necessity. Preparations that might have included fasting, careful preparation of tools and body, perhaps quiet words spoken to no one in particular before setting out. When a hunt succeeded, when an animal fell and his blood stained the snow, this was understood as a moment heavy with meaning, not simply a transaction of calories from one creature to another. Nothing from a successful hunt was wasted. Meat and fat provided food, obviously, but bones became tools and ornaments. Hides became clothing and shelter, sinew became thread. Even organs found their use, stomachs and bladders as containers for water, for storage. In this complete use, this refusal to waste any part of what an animal's death provided, there was both practicality and a kind of respect, an insistence that nothing about this death would be treated carelessly, that the animal's life, given up, would be honored through the sheer scope of its usefulness afterward. And yet there were exceptions too. Animals that appeared often in the deep cave paintings but rarely in the bones left behind from meals. Cave lions, woody rhinoceros, creatures perhaps too dangerous to hunt regularly, or perhaps considered sacred in some way we simply cannot reconstruct now. This pattern tells us something important, even without telling us exactly what that something is, that not all animals held the same place in the minds of these ancient people, that some careful, complex system of meaning divided the world of creatures into categories we can only glimpse now, faintly, at a great and permanent distance. Let this whole complicated, respectful relationship settle in your mind now, gently, without needing to resolve into any neat conclusion. Some things don't need they can simply be held quietly, the way you're holding this whole long story right now, drifting further into sleep with every passing sentence. Part 20, a thread between GNRATO and S. These people never lived alone. They were a chain stretching across generations, each link depending completely on the ones before and after it. A structure so essential to their survival that it barely needed to be discussed at all. It was simply the shape that life took, the way water simply takes the shape of whatever container holds it. The old passed their knowledge to the young constantly, through action far more than through direct instruction, which plants could be eaten safely, and which looked similar but carried danger inside them, which valleys stayed sheltered from the worst winds, how to build a fire that would hold through a whole long night, how to shape a tool that would hold its edge through a whole long season of use. This knowledge flowed on, generation after generation, and every single person alive at any given moment was simultaneously a receiver of everything that came before them, and eventually, the last carrier of at least some part of it forward into whatever came next. Children learn by watching the adults around them constantly, absorbing knowledge less through formal teaching than through simple, patient presence, sitting nearby while work was done, gradually being given small tasks suited to small hands, slowly earning larger responsibilities as both skill and trust grew together. Small tools, deliberately sized for small hands, have been found in places like this one. Clear, physical proof that children joined the essential work of survival from a very young age, not as an afterthought, but as a genuine, valued part of how the whole group continued functioning. The old, even as their strength gradually faded, remained valuable in ways that had nothing to do with physical capability. Their memory, their accumulated experience, mattered as deeply as any younger person's strength or speed. In some ancient graves, archaeologists have found the remains of people who survived serious injuries or illness for many years afterward, clearly cared for by others who fed them, who kept them warm, who valued their continued presence long after they could no longer contribute in the old, physical ways. This is evidence of something genuinely tender, reaching across all that distance of time to touch us, even now. Strong social bonds, real compassion, a willingness to carry the weight of someone who could no longer carry their own, simply because that person still mattered, still belonged, still had something: memory, wisdom, simple companionship, worth sustaining. No one was ever truly alone in this world. Not really, not for long. Everyone had a place, however small, and everyone had worth, however it was measured. Even the child too young yet to contribute meaningfully was valued, protected, invested in, on the quiet, patient understanding that this investment would eventually be repaid many times over, across a whole lifetime of contributions still ahead of them. You can feel that same thread now, in your own life, if you let yourself trace it gently backward. The people who love you, the people waiting for you, the people who value you in ways both spoken and unspoken. You are not alone, and you have never truly been alone. Connected as you are to an unbroken chain of care stretching back further than any single memory could ever hold. All the way back to nights exactly like the ones we've been visiting tonight, and further back still, into depths of time that have no names left for us to use. Let that thread hold you now, gently, the way it has always held everyone who ever needed holding. Rest inside it. Let it carry some of the weight you've been carrying alone. You don't need to hold everything yourself tonight. You never really did. Part 21, Spring. Glimpsed from afar. Let's move forward now, slowly, through the remaining weeks of this long winter. The way the season itself moves, almost imperceptibly at first, then, all at once, undeniably,